Erev Tov Rabotai, we're continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Kilayim. We're up to Perek Hey, Mishnah Daled. We spoke about a wine press. The Mishnah now is going to talk about another law about planting in an actual wine press, not in a vineyard, just a wine press in general. Gefen Shinitua Bagat or Baneka, if a grapevine is planted and growing inside of a wine press or inside a crack in the ground. Now, a neka, the Mifashim explained, is a naturally occurring crack in the ground, and it's fairly long. Sometimes it's wide and deep somewhat, and the grower wants to plant seeds inside the wine press or the crack in the ground. Notnina vodata, we give the grapevine its 6 tefach work area. And then he can plant the rest. He can plant the rest of the wine press or the crack in the ground with seeds. And the Mifashim explained, since it's only a single vine, we know that the work area is just 6 tefachim. Now the Mishnah is teaching us here, even though the grapevine is growing in an enclosed area, which if anything makes it look like you're planting Kilayim, nevertheless you are allowed to plant seeds there just with the usual separation of 6 tefachim. Rabbi Yossi says in En Sham Arba Amot, if there is less than 4 by 4 amot in the wine press or in the crack in the ground, Lo Yavi Zera Lesham, he cannot bring seeds and plant them there. However, if the wine press or this crack in the ground is 4 by 4 amot, you can plant seeds up to 6 tefachim away from the vine. And the Mepharshim explained Rabbi Yossi's reason is like this. It's really based off the previous chapter 4, Mishnah 1, that if a vineyard is surrounded by a wall, the empty space between the edge of the vineyard and the wall is considered part of the vineyard, unless it's large enough to be considered a space on its own right. That was the case we spoke about the perimeter of the vineyard. Rabbi Yossi argues that the same logic really applies to a single vine as well. As long as the single vine is surrounded by a wall, for example, the sides of the wine press, the crack in the ground, the enclosed area is considered secondary to the vine unless there is enough empty space in the enclosed area to be considered significant on its own. Therefore, you are not allowed to plant seeds in the wine press or in this crack in the ground unless the enclosed area is 4 by 4 amot. Now, if the enclosed area is this big, 4 by 4 amot, you are allowed to plant seeds until 6 tefachim away from the vine. The Mishnah now concludes with another example of an independent area inside of a vineyard. If there is a house inside a vineyard, we may plant seeds inside the house, since the walls of the house separate the inside of the vineyard that is around it. And Foshim explained that the Mishnah is teaching us, even though the vines surround the houses this house on all the sides, they don't nullify the walls of the house and make the seeds asur. Rather, the walls are considered a valid separation, even though it's surrounded by vines. Why? Because the walls have a roof on top of it to separate the interior of the house completely from the surrounding vines. We learned this from a pasuk that Tosfot Yerushalmi quotes in the name, the Tosfot Yom Tov, quotes in the name of the Yerushalmi. That is in Rabotai Mishnah Daled. Mishnah Hey now is going to continue discussing the dispute. We learned in chapter 4, Mishnah 5, Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai have a machloket, the dispute. How many rows of a vineyard become asur when seeds are planted within the 4 amma work area outside of the vineyard? Bet Shammai say only 1 row is prohibited, whereas Bet Hillel say 2 rows. The Mishnah now is going to discuss how many rows become asur when seeds are planted inside of the vineyard. Now, the Mishnah says like this. If a person plants vegetables in a vineyard, and they take root, or he sees vegetables growing in his vineyard and he maintains them, meaning he doesn't pull them out. This prohibits the surrounding 45 vines. Ematai, when is this the case? Meaning, in what case do we say that the vegetables prohibit 45 vines? That's when the vines are planted in rows that are 4 amot apart or 5 amot apart. And the Mepharshim explain 45 vines surrounding the vegetables, as well as the vegetables themselves, become asur for benefit as Kilayim of the vineyard. That's in a case of a vineyard with at least 9 rows, each having 9 vines. In a standard vineyard, these rows are 4 amot apart from one another. The reason for this prohibition is that it's asur to plant inside a vineyard, and that prohibits all the vines that are within 16 amot of it in every single direction. So if vegetables are planted around the center vine, we have to draw a circle around them with a radius of 16 amot. So in a vineyard in which there are rows of are 4 amot away from one another, either horizontally or vertically, that circle in essence will have 45 vines. Now, the 4 amot separating the rows doesn't include the thickness of the vine themselves. That's why the last row of the vine falls just outside the 16 amot circle. And again, Rabotai, if you can look at the art school elucidated diagrams, they will help you a lot in understanding this Mishnah. When it's 4 amot apart, when it's 5 amot apart. Now again, like we said, Rabotai, the Mishnah says this is only when the vines are planted in rows that are 4 amot apart or 5 amot apart. Why? Because when the rows are planted 5 amot apart, a circle with a 16 amot radius is not going to have 45 vines, only 37. Since the rows are 5 amot apart, only 3 rows fit in the 16 amot radius of the circle, not 4. However, the Mishnah says that 45 vines are nevertheless asur, and the Tosfot Yom Tov explains that's because the sages were afraid that people who see the vineyard might not be able to tell that the rows are 5 amot apart. They're going to assume that they're the standard 4 amot apart. If they saw only 37 vines being removed, they're going to assume that's all you have to take out, even in a standard vineyard. So the Chachamim, in order to prevent such a mistake, they required that the 5 amot vineyard is treated the same as the standard 4 amot vineyard, with 45 vines being removed, because you're not allowed to benefit from them. However, if they were planted in rows that are 6 amot apart or 7 amot apart, the vegetables are only going to prohibit the vines that are actually within the 16 amot in every direction. We're not going to have any decree to make it similar like the 4 amot. Like the 4 amot separation. And the Vilshim explain a vineyard when you have a vineyard that is the rows are separated by spaces of 6 or 7 amot, no one's going to make such a mistake to consider it the standard 4 amot separation. Therefore, the Chachamim didn't decree that in that case that the additional vine should be asur. Therefore, in this 6 and 7 amot case, only 21 vines will become asur. Agulot lo merubaot. This 16 amot are measured as a circle and not as a square. And the Mepharshim explain that we don't measure the 16 amot in each of the 4 directions and then connect these points by drawing a square. Rather, we measure the 16 amot around the vegetables in a circle. Only the vines that are within the circle become asur, and it's a leniency in essence. Why? Because a square would have included more vines than a circle. And again, Rabotai, if you can see the diagram, you'll see how the circle has less vines that become prohibited in the 16 amot radius that we're going to draw. That is the end of today's Mishna Yomi, Rabotai. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen v'amen.